The security specialist gave her a rap. She dropped it and asked a secret question. The diplomatic tablet in Marcus's grip was sleek, luminous, and maddeningly inadequate. It cataloged every detail of the Syrah's chromatic signaling, over 400 light patterns for every shade of meaning, but nothing about deciphering a Syrah's true intent, or if they even possessed one. Marcus, a human security specialist whose career relied on reading the faintest hint of emotion, had been assigned to safeguard Chief Envoy Lyrae aboard the Syrah diplomatic cruiser. He wasn't chosen for strength, but for a perception index so uncanny it seemed almost supernatural. But what good was that when the Syrah had purged emotion from their culture, perfecting rationality over centuries, rendering themselves indecipherable to outsiders? He moved through the cruiser's airlock, a silent threshold that swallowed all familiar sounds. The air was scrubbed until it held no trace of scent, only a clarity that threatened to erase his memories of anything warmer or more chaotic. Corridors stretched in symmetrical arcs, parting and reforming in gentle glides, as if the ship itself rejected the idea of resistance. And there, on the command deck, stood Lyrae, a living prism, her skin refracting the stark white light into a translucent tapestry of swirling rainbows, each hue shifting with every micro-movement. Her hair flowed like molten starlight, a cascade of iridescent filaments that danced around her shoulders. Her eyes, vast and violet, glowed with a quiet, unyielding intelligence, and her form seemed to waver with the light, never quite settling, never quite real. Even the six-toed feet that barely grazed the floor suggested a being caught between worlds. She awaited him, her posture so still it bordered on surreal. When her gaze met his, Marcus felt the prickle of scrutiny. A scientist appraising a specimen, or perhaps a puzzle. A single band of color flickered across her skin, cool blue edged with green. His neural implant translated. Asset acknowledged. Status, operational. He offered a practiced, neutral bow, careful not to betray the nervous energy humming through his veins. Marcus Ryle, Security Liaison. I am here to protect you, Chief Envoy. Lyrae's nod was measured, as if weighed against 1,000 possible responses. No words, only a small dip of her luminous head, an affirmation of protocol rather than welcome. From that moment, Marcus was her shadow. He followed her through the immaculate corridors, absorbing the rhythm of the ship's quiet order, the hum of graviton stabilizers, the pulse of life support arrays. He mapped escape routes and noted every anomaly, but his attention was inexorably drawn back to Lyrae. Her presence was magnetic, not just for her otherworldly beauty, but for the enigma she carried. A mind trained to extinguish emotion, yet haunted by something softer beneath. Negotiations began in a crystalline chamber aboard a neutral orbital hub, where the walls refracted every motion into 1,000 spectral shards. Delegates gathered at the table, Syrah, Vorn Consortium, and the distant cold Minister Ral from the Terran Republic. Lyrae spoke with flawless logic, her voice a clear chime in the engineered silence. Every argument, every counterpoint unfolded like a mathematical proof. Marcus stood behind her, gaze scanning the chamber, neural overlays feeding him tactical data. He watched, but not only for threats. He watched Lyrae. A delegate from the Vorn Consortium, face a mask of politeness, issued a statement that in another context would have sounded innocuous. But Marcus caught the edge in the words, a veiled warning. He glanced at Lyrae and saw, for the briefest instant, a shimmer ripple through her liquid hair. A tremor of unease, gone before anyone else could notice. Marcus's breath caught. The Syrah were not statues. Behind all that training, Lyrae felt fear. From then on, Marcus began to see her differently. He noticed the way her violet eyes deepened, almost imperceptibly, whenever Minister Ral lied, an undertone of storm behind the calm. He tracked the minuscule tightening of her form, the barely there contraction of her shifting skin when discomfort struck. Where the tablet showed patterns and probabilities, Marcus mapped a secret language of microsignals and instinct. Their glances grew more frequent. At first they were routine checks, Leary verifying his presence, Marcus reassuring her with a nod. But soon, the glances became a private dialogue. When the tension in the chamber mounted, he would catch her eye and offer the ghost of a smile. She would look back, a subtle flicker of gold crossing her cheek, her reply unreadable to anyone but him. After the session, as they navigated the silent, sterile corridors, Marcus dared to speak. That threat from the Vorn delegate. It was deliberate. Did you sense it? Leary paused. Her eyes met his, the violet deepening, a faint iridescent shadow passing through. I observed the variables, she replied, her voice controlled. Risk assessment updated. Not just variables, Marcus pressed, his tone gentle. You reacted. I saw it. It's all right to... She turned away, but her hand lifted, brushing her hair back. For an instant, a shimmer of blue crossed her knuckles. Regret, perhaps, or gratitude. She said nothing else, but Marcus understood. She trusted him now, with the truth beneath the algorithms. It was only hours later, in the ship's data nexus, that the first attempt on her life arrived. A message from Sierra High Command, an innocuous update delivered via harmonic pulse. Marcus stood at Lirai's side, his attention split between the incoming data and the nearly invisible tension in her posture. As the transmission began, he saw Lirai's form flicker, a brief, almost subliminal stutter in her prismatic skin. He reacted at once, stepping forward, voice level but urgent. Pause transmission, routine security scan. Technicians hesitated. Lirai's eyes flashed with confusion, but she nodded, signaling compliance. The message was cut off, and the subtle pulse, now isolated, was detected by Marcus's neural implant. A sabotage, perfectly engineered to destabilize Sierra neural patterns. He reported the anomaly, cloaking his intervention in technical jargon. Afterward, as the corridors emptied and silence reclaimed the ship, Marcus walked beside Lirai. No words passed between them. Then, with an elegance as deliberate as any diplomatic maneuver, she reached up and brushed her delicate fingers over her ear. A silent acknowledgement, an unspoken gratitude. Their bond, once defined by protocol, had shifted into something fragile, uncertain, and desperately real. Marcus's investigation into the failed attack revealed its source. Someone within Lirai's own delegation, using Ral's security access. It was a betrayal masked by protocol and hidden behind layers of digital obfuscation, but Marcus's intuition drew him to the truth as unerringly as a magnet to lodestone. The logs were clear. Ral's credentials had opened the digital gate, and a Sierra data specialist had delivered the kill code. He paced the dim, crystalline data vault, his neural interface flickering with encrypted alerts. The ship's silence pressed in, the hush broken only by the faint hum of systems. Lirai was surrounded by potential traitors, yet every word, every transmission she received was surveilled. Direct warning was impossible. Subtlety was their only hope. Marcus's mind raced. He needed a language the Sierra would not suspect, a method only Lirai could decipher. He found his answer in Terran literature, irrational, poetic, and utterly dismissed by Sierra logic. He composed his warning as a security briefing, laced with passages from Shakespeare and highlighted lines of T.S. Eliot, underlined with code only a fellow outcast might grasp. To anyone else, it was a report on defensive countermeasures. To Lirai, if she saw through the mask, it was a map of betrayal. Later, hidden in a shadowed corridor, Marcus watched as Lirai received the briefing. Alone in her quarters, she read his message, her slender form framed in the cool radiance of the crystalline walls. Her skin, usually a perfect shifting blend of Sierra calm, shivered and fractured with color as she pressed her palms to the transparent surface. A tremor ran through her, composure shattering in the privacy she so rarely claimed. Marcus's role had shifted. He was no longer just the guardian of an envoy, but the protector of a woman standing at the edge of a precipice, her world and her faith unraveling in real time. A few hours later, a data burst arrived, ostensibly a routine update on station docking protocols. Embedded within the stream, Marcus detected a mathematically perfect sequence of prime numbers buried in the footnotes of a Sierra treatise on unpredictability. To anyone else, it was noise. To Marcus, it was a question. How do I fight those who know my every move? He typed his reply into a maintenance log, knowing Lyrae would intercept it. You must act in ways they cannot predict. The words were simple, but the meaning resonated between them like a chord struck in darkness. They had formed a secret alliance, not just against assassins and traitors, but against the suffocating empire of reason that had ruled Lyrae's life. Marcus felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders, heavier and sharper than any burden of duty. He was no longer just her shield, he was her partner, her confidant in a war waged with both logic and longing. The next attack did not bother with subterfuge. A tremor ran through the station, the crystalline walls humming with sudden violence. Then, an explosion. The chamber shook, light flickering, alarms screaming through the corridors. People screamed. Sierra and Terran alike surged toward the exits, panic fraying the edges of protocol. Marcus found Lyrae by instinct, forcing his way through the press of bodies. Smoke drifted, and the sharp tang of burning circuitry filled the air. Ral appeared, his eyes cold and unreadable, flanked by two aides whose hands were hidden beneath their cloaks. He called out, his voice raised above the chaos. "Chief Envoy, this way! Follow my signal. We have secured transport." Lyrae hesitated, her form quivering. Marcus caught her arm. "No," he hissed. "That is not your escape. With me." Lyrae's gaze darted between Marcus and Ral. The color that raced across her skin was wild, amber and crimson, fear and warning. "Protocol," she started, but Marcus cut her off. "Forget protocol. Trust me." Ral's eyes narrowed. The two aides moved to intercept, hands flashing out. One held a shimmering blade, the other a pulse emitter. Marcus thrust Lyrae behind him, his own sidearm out, leveling it at Ral. "Stand down," Marcus barked, voice iron. "You're not taking her anywhere." The aides lunged. The fight was a brutal collision of Sierra precision and Marcus's human improvisation. He ducked a blade, twisted an arm, fired a disabling shot into the shoulder of one attacker. Pain burst along his ribs as the blade found flesh. Blood ran, warm and sticky, but adrenaline drove him on. He kicked the pulse emitter from the second aide's hand and slammed the man into the wall, buying precious seconds. Lyrae, stunned by the violence, nevertheless responded with a quickness born of desperation. She pressed her hand to a panel, opening an emergency conduit. "In here!" she cried. Marcus grabbed her hand and pulled her into the narrow passage, sealing the door behind them. The thud of fists and the crackle of blasters echoed on the other side, but Marcus had already keyed in a lockdown code. They ran, breath ragged, down twisting corridors, the station's alarms still howling. They reached Lyrae's quarters, Marcus's vision swimming from blood loss. He keyed the seal, the door sliding closed with a reassuring finality. Only then did the din recede, replaced by the gentle iridescent glow that bathed her private sanctuary. The silence was almost tender by comparison. Lyrae caught Marcus as he staggered, her arms surprisingly strong. "You are injured," she said, voice taut with something too close to panic for Sierra taste. "It's nothing," he lied, but already the pain was clouding his thoughts. "Sit. I will tend to you." She guided him to a padded bench, activating the cleansing pod, a Sierra device that glimmered with soft light and emitted a cool mist that soothed wounds and sterilized tissue. Lyrae's fingers moved with clinical precision, but Marcus saw the tremor in her hands. Her skin shifted with anxious color, the hues swirling too quickly to follow. "Hold still." Her voice wavered, not with uncertainty, but with a brittle urgency. She pressed a med patch to his side, watching his face for signs of pain, her own expression drawn and tight. "This should help. This. The bleeding will stop soon. Marcus watched her, his breath shallow. You saved me, he said, managing a faint smile. Lyri shook her head. No, I was only following your lead. Her eyes shimmered with unspoken questions. How did you know? About Ral, the trap? He hesitated, then reached for her hand. Because I saw you. Not just the envoy. You. Their hands lingered, fingers entwined in a gesture that was both shield and invitation. When Marcus emerged from the cleansing pod, he found Lyri waiting, a soft wrap folded in her arms. It was a simple thing, woven from Terran cotton, not Syrah synthweave, a gesture of care that no protocol required. She stepped closer, hesitating only a breath, then extended the wrap to him. Her violet eyes searched his face, uncertain. He reached for the cloth, their hands brushing. A spark jumped between them, electric and undeniable. For a moment, the rules of their worlds fell away. Lyri took the wrap, her fingers closing around his, then slowly, deliberately, let it slip to the floor, the cloth pooling at their feet. Her hand remained in his, her skin awash with color, copper and indigo, longing and fear. Her voice, usually so controlled, was raw and trembling as she looked up at him. Can you show me how to feel anger? She asked, the forbidden words hanging in the air between them, more intimate than any touch. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Marcus nodded, gently tightening his hold on her hand as if to say, I will show you everything they never let you feel. Lyri's request was both rebellion and plea, a yearning for the weapon her people had denied her. Can you show me how to feel anger? She asked, her voice trembling in the hush of her quarters, violet eyes searching Marcus for something she could not name. In that moment, he saw not just a diplomat, but a woman on the edge of transformation, desperate to seize what the Syrah had spent centuries erasing. He did not answer right away. Instead, he reached for her hand, feeling the subtle quiver in her fingers. Anger is not the beginning, he said quietly. First comes fear. You have to know what you're fighting to protect. Lyri's composure fractured, but she nodded. They began her lessons in secrecy, the crystalline walls around them humming with silent witness. Marcus stood close, his presence a steady anchor as he guided her through the chaos within. Each night, after the corridors emptied and the surveillance fields powered down for maintenance, he would meet her in the soft-lit sanctuary of her quarters. He taught her to close her eyes and breathe deeply, to find the tremors in her body rather than smother them. Don't suppress it, he urged. Let it sharpen you. Fear is information. Let it tell you what matters. She tried. In those early sessions, her hands clenched in her lap, the colors in her skin swirling in confusion. I was taught to let thought override instinct, she confessed one night, voice strained. To banish feeling. He crouched before her, their faces close. What do you fear most, Lyri? Not as a Syrah, as yourself. For a long time, she was silent. Then, in a whisper almost too faint to hear, she said, Not destruction, not defeat, but vanishing. That I will do everything right, sacrifice everything, and be forgotten. That I will leave no mark, no memory at all. Marcus's heart twisted at the vulnerability in her admission. He gently reached out, his thumb brushing away a tear that glimmered, refracting starlight from her hair. That is a fear worth fighting, he said softly. Let it guide you, not rule you. He pushed her, sometimes hard, using focus drills, calling up scenarios, prodding her to name the things that haunted her. If they come for you again, what will you do? He would press. How will you answer them? Some nights she fought back, her voice sharp. I am not weak. I am Syrah. Other times, she crumbled, voice breaking. Each session chipped away at the steel casing of her composure, until one evening, as he pressed her to relive the betrayal of Ral and the terror of the failed assassination, a strangled cry escaped her lips. She buried her face in her hands, sobs racking her slender form, and collapsed into Marcus's arms. He held her tightly, his own chest aching as her starlit hair spilled over his shoulder. He whispered comfort, his words soft against the top of her head. "You are not alone, Lyre, not anymore." In those moments, every line between guardian and confidant blurred, the warmth of her trust sinking into him deeper than any wound. Gradually, she learned to ride the wave of fear, to let it crest and recede, leaving her sharper. He taught her the mechanics of anger, how to summon it, harness it, and let it burn away the fog of confusion. "Anger is not wildness," he told her one night. "It's clarity. It's knowing you will not accept what has been done to you." After each session, Lyre would linger in the quiet glow, her body pressed to his, head nestled against his chest. She learned the human language of touch, resting in his embrace, her arm slipping around his waist, her fingers tracing the scar from his recent wound. Her eyes, when they met his, were no longer cold gems, but warm and searching. Their words became fewer, their silences filled with meaning. One evening, after a particularly difficult session, she lay curled against him on the bench, her voice soft. "Why do you stay? You could have left after the attack." He smiled, brushing a strand of shimmering hair from her brow. "I stay because I want to, because you trust me. That's all I need." She closed her eyes, pressing closer. "I don't want to vanish, Marcus. I want to matter. To someone." "You do," he whispered, heart pounding. "You matter to me." As the final day approached, the atmosphere on the station thickened with anticipation and tension. The treaty signing was to be the crown of Lyre's mission, a peace forged between Syrah and Terran, witnessed by the Vorn Consortium and all the rival factions. Marcus could see the strain on her, even as she practiced serenity before the mirror. He could feel the tempest in her, and she felt his silent encouragement in every glance. The day of the signing arrived. The assembly hall was a marvel of Syrah design, its crystalline walls refracting the light into shifting auras, casting rainbows over delegates gathered in their finest attire. Lyre stood at the center, draped in a formal robe, her face a mask of calm. Marcus waited just behind the security line, his earpiece live, eyes tracking every movement. Through the subdermal neural link, he fed her tactical updates, positions, readings, even the pulse of his own heartbeat, steady and reassuring. "Ral is here," Marcus murmured through the link. "He's confident. He thinks he's won." Larry's fingers twitched by her side, but her face showed nothing. "I am ready," she replied in silence, her mind brushing his, like a whispered promise. The proceedings began as expected. The delegates exchanged ritual greetings, their words formal and empty. Ral, resplendent in his silver-trimmed robe, stood to Lyre's left, eyes gleaming with suppressed triumph. His allies lingered nearby, smug behind their veils of propriety. Lyre began her address. Her voice was clear, measured, the picture of Syrah poise. "Today we mark the convergence of logic and trust. The Syrah extend their hand." Marcus's eyes never left her. He could see, beneath the surface, the storm she contained. Through the link, he sent her the last message. "Now." Lyre's gaze lifted, and for the first time, true emotion flared in her eyes, bright, impossible to miss. She turned from her prepared remarks, her voice rising, edged with a new, controlled fury that made every head in the chamber lift. "But peace is not forged through words alone," she declared, her tone slicing through the crystalline hush. "It requires truth, and truth today demands that I speak what tradition would silence." A ripple of unease ran through the crowd. Ral's face tightened, his fingers clenching. Lyre drew herself up, her form radiant, colors burning across her skin. There has been deception within our ranks, a conspiracy to sabotage this treaty, to use my life as a pawn. She locked eyes with Rao, voice steady but blazing. I have the evidence. The source was here, hiding behind the mask of loyalty. The chamber exploded into noise, outrage, shock, questions. Security teams moved in, Syrah and Terran guards fanning out. Marcus sent commands through his link, isolating Rao and his closest allies. The plot unraveled in a matter of heartbeats. Data feeds revealed the sabotage, communication logs unspooled, witnesses stepped forward. Rao, cornered and pale, tried to protest, but Leary's testimony was undeniable, her composure unbreakable. She had learned to wield anger, not as chaos, but as a weapon of truth. As Rao was led away, the assembly stilled, turning to Leary, who stood in the center, light shimmering around her, a new and unexpected power in her gaze. Marcus watched from the edge of the crowd, pride swelling in his chest. She had not vanished. She had changed everything. The aftermath was a quiet revolution. The traitors were detained without spectacle. The treaty was signed in good faith, the ink of Leary's signature shimmering with the same defiant light that now flickered within her. Syrah tradition had not prepared them for a leader who wielded emotion like a blade, nor had Marcus expected to become a part of something so transformative. The halls, once echoing with rigid order, now pulsed with cautious hope. Leary had become more than a diplomat. She was legend, the envoy who had reclaimed a lost piece of the Syrah soul. Her name passed in whispers through the ranks, spoken with awe and uncertainty. Marcus, for his part, moved through the corridors no longer as a shadow, but as a man recognized for his loyalty and his daring. He had watched Leary shatter the boundaries of her upbringing, and in doing so, had found his own purpose evolving. In the sanctuary of her quarters, the barrier that had separated them for so long dissolved. The room, once perfumed only by sterility, now felt alive, humming with an energy Marcus could not quantify. Light from the crystalline walls caught in Leary's hair, casting violet and gold over their entwined hands. The air was warm with possibility. Leary turned to him, her gaze softer, her smile unguarded. The council has approved a new post, she said, her voice gentle but edged with resolve. Principal advisor, to the chief envoy. It is a role of trust, not just counsel, partnership. Will you accept it, Marcus? He looked at her, the weight of their journey settling over him. How he had arrived as a lone protector, how he had become confidant, teacher, and now, in some way, a liberator of a leader's heart. He let a slow smile break across his face. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Her answering smile was genuine, radiant, and beautiful in its unpredictability. She reached up to cup his cheek, her skin warm against his, and for a moment, all the barriers between Syrah and human, envoy, and guardian vanished. Together, they turned to the viewport, gazing at the sweep of distant stars, a new future unfurling before them, wild and unknown. A year passed, marked by small changes that grew into seismic shifts. Marcus stood at Leary's side, no longer an outsider, but woven into the fabric of Syrah leadership. He wore the insignia of principal advisor, his presence accepted, if not always understood, by those who had once dismissed him as an unpredictable Terran. Now he stood in the heart of the Syrah council chamber, a crystalline amphitheater where light refracted into infinite prisms. The council gathered in concentric arcs, their expressions composed, but tensions simmered beneath the surface. Leary, now fully chief envoy, presided at the center, her robe a cascade of shifting violet and indigo, her presence serene yet unyielding. The matter before them was grave. The Hadron League, a coalition known for their martial pride, had established a blockade at the Syrah border. The council's logic was unanimous: retaliate with equal force. For the Syrah, military precision was the answer to aggression. Apology was illogical, an admission of inferiority. One by one, the counselors made their case. Chief Envoy, the League will interpret hesitation as weakness, intoned Counselor Sileth, his voice measured. A swift strike will remind them of the consequences. Another, Counselor Varel, echoed the sentiment. We cannot afford to negotiate with those who understand only strength. The data supports intervention. Marcus observed Lyrae closely. She was silent, listening, her face the picture of Syrah calm. But he recognized the subtle signals, the way her fingers pressed together, the flicker of color beneath her skin. He knew she was remembering the night she had stood before her people and revealed the truth, the night she had learned to wield emotion as more than a liability. At last, the chamber fell silent, waiting for her verdict. Lyrae rose, her robes catching the light, casting a halo around her. She looked not at the counselors, but at Marcus, just for a heartbeat, their eyes meeting, a thread of trust passing silently between them. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but carried a resonance that filled every crystalline corner of the hall. You speak of logic, and logic is our foundation. But logic without empathy is brittle. The Hadron League acts out of fear, not just ambition. We have wounded their pride. We must acknowledge that pain if we wish to build lasting peace. Counselor Sileth frowned. Chief Envoy, apology is illogical. It will be seen as submission. Lyrae shook her head. Submission is silence. True strength is the courage to reach out first. She turned to address them all. We will not retaliate. I will go myself and offer reconciliation. The words landed like a shockwave. Silence, thick and absolute, swept the chamber. For the Syrah, such vulnerability was anathema, a break in the crystalline order of their worldview. Faces blanched, and the subtle light of disapproval flickered across the council. Chief Envoy, the risk is unacceptable, Counselor Varel protested, his tone edged with alarm. If you are harmed, the repercussions— I am aware of the risk, Lyrae replied. But I have learned. Sometimes the unpredictable path is the one that leads to true change. Another counselor, her voice cool but desperate, challenged. Do you speak for yourself or for the Syrah? Lyrae straightened, her form radiant with conviction. I speak for the Syrah who wish to become more than logic alone. I speak for those who refuse to vanish. The debate surged, voices rising in silent protest, gestures, color bands, all the nonverbal language of Syrah dissent. But Lyrae did not waver. She stood alone in the center, emotion woven into her poise, wielding empathy as a strategic tool rather than a weakness. She glanced at Marcus, seeking something only he could give. He met her gaze, and with a small, sure nod, gave her the courage she needed, the affirmation that her path, though uncharted, was not walked alone. With that, the chamber quieted, and a new chapter in Syrah history began, shaped not by algorithms or tradition, but by the unpredictable, luminous bond between a leader and the man who had taught her to feel. In her private sanctuary, the weight of leadership pressed down. The once sterile rooms now held human comforts, soft fabrics draped over the crystalline seats, warm lights casting gentle shadows in corners that had never known dusk. The subtle fragrance of Terran tea mingled with the delicate tang of Syrah oils. Lyrae stood by the viewport, her form silhouetted against the star fields, exhaustion in every line of her posture. Marcus watched her from across the room, quietly folding a blanket that she had left behind that morning. She turned, the light catching the iridescent strands of her hair, her eyes storm-dark with doubt. Am I becoming too human? She asked, the words trembling in the hush. Am I losing what it means to be Syrah? He crossed the room, each step careful and sure, until he was close enough to see the flicker of uncertainty ripple across her skin. Gently, he took her face in his hands, thumbs brushing the high bones of her cheeks. You're not losing yourself, he said, his voice low and certain. You're growing. You're becoming more more than what you were told to be. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, letting herself be held by something warmer than logic. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was full, not empty, with shared memories and unspoken promises. The crisis that had once forged their bond had transformed, over time, into something deeper. They had learned to navigate each other's strengths and weaknesses, each morning a new chance to relearn the language of love. Lyrae found solace in their silent rituals, the way Marcus brewed coffee with ceremonial care, the way she set aside her neural tablet and simply listened to the rhythm of his breathing. There was peace in the shared hush before dawn, when the world had not yet intruded, and they could simply exist. No titles, no expectations, just two souls anchored together. For Marcus, Larry's logic became a beacon, a way to clarify his often tangled thoughts, to see the world with new eyes. Their love was an anchor, something steady beneath the shifting tides of duty and politics. And it was not a perfect thing. Sometimes they argued, their voices rising as old habits clashed with new desires. But even in those moments, there was trust, a sense that whatever storm they weathered, they would weather it together. One evening, as the golden light softened the lines of the room, Leary lay with her head in Marcus's lap, her gaze distant. "The lessons aren't over, are they?" she asked quietly, fingers tracing idle patterns along his wrist. Marcus smiled, a slow, reassuring curve of his lips. "No. We're just beginning a new chapter." He bent down, pressing a kiss to her brow, lingering, then to her lips. Slow, deep, full of promises neither needed to say aloud. She responded with a passion that was fierce and new, her arms winding around him, pulling him closer until there was nothing between them but heart and breath. In that embrace, the world outside faded. The weight of expectation, the burden of titles, chief envoy, principal advisor, Syrah, human, disappeared. There was only Lyrae and Marcus, partners, lovers, whole. Morning came on the day of Lyrae's mission to the Hadron system. She dressed in ceremonial robes of violet and silver, the colors shifting with her mood, the patterns alive with subtle emotion. Marcus watched her prepare, fastening the final clasp at her shoulder, his hands steady, but his eyes betraying the worry he tried to hide. Lyrae caught his hand before he could turn away. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice trembling just slightly. "I am brave, but I am not fearless." He drew her close, holding her for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "You don't have to be," he murmured. "You just have to be true to yourself. That's all anyone can ask." She drew strength from his embrace, letting her doubts recede. Together, they walked through the corridors toward the great assembly hall, where the Syrah Council and their closest advisors awaited. The hall shimmered with anticipation, every crystalline facet reflecting both hope and apprehension. Lyrae paused at the threshold, taking a deep breath. The doors parted, and all eyes turned to her. She stepped forward, her bearing regal, her composure flawless. But Marcus saw the fire burning within her, the hard-won courage shining just beneath the surface. She addressed the assembly, her voice carrying clear and strong. "Fellow Syrah, honored counselors, today I depart for the Hadron system. I go not to demand, but to understand. Logic, while our foundation, has limits. It cannot mend what pride has broken, nor can it soothe the pain of misunderstanding. We must become more than the sum of our equations." A murmur ran through the crowd, disbelief, resistance, but also curiosity. Lyrae pressed on, undaunted. "We have learned much from other cultures, most of all, the necessity of compassion. To be Syrah is to value clarity, but clarity does not preclude empathy. The Hadron League fears us because they do not know us. I intend to change that, not with force, but with understanding. She let the words hang in the air, letting their meaning settle. Some will say this is weakness. I say it is our greatest strength. To admit we do not have all the answers, to reach out in peace even when it is difficult, is the mark of a leader who has learned from both logic and love. The counselors exchanged glances, their faces etched with uncertainty. In the past, no Sira leader would have dared speak of love or vulnerability before the assembly. Yet here she stood, her voice unwavering, the currents of change flowing around her. And then, in a gesture that broke with every tradition, Lyrai turned from the podium. She walked with deliberate grace across the wide expanse of the hall, her gaze never wavering from Marcus, who stood just beyond the circle of counselors. He met her eyes, his heart pounding with pride and hope. Without hesitation, she reached out and took his hand. The hall, for a moment, was utterly still. Sira and human joined in a public bond, a symbol of change, witnessed by the old order and the new. In that simple, powerful gesture, Lyri signaled the future she chose, one built not just on reason, but on the fierce, unpredictable power of connection. The assembly watched, silent and transformed, as together they stepped forward into the unknown, hand in hand. The shock of Lyri's gesture rippled through Sira society. News of the envoy taking a human's hand in the council hall flashed through every layer of their culture, from the ancient keepers of tradition to the youngest cadets learning protocol. For centuries, the Sira had prized predictability above all. Feelings were for the uncontrolled, the primitive, the illogical. But now, their chief envoy had defied all expectation, and the rigid glass of convention began to crack. Elders exchanged anxious glances, but the young watched with wide eyes and secret smiles, wondering what else might be possible. For Marcus, standing at Lyrai's side, the hall's silence had felt like the calm after a storm, the breathless moment before a new world began. Her hand in his was warm and strong, a living anchor in a sea of uncertainty. He felt the stares, sensed the turmoil swirling through the chamber, but all that mattered was the trust shining in Lyri's eyes. This was no longer just her revolution, it belonged to them both. The days that followed were a blur of change. Sira Newsnets dissected every nuance of Lyri's speech and her unprecedented gesture. Critics railed against the breaking of ancient codes, but their words felt brittle and hollow in the face of the hope that now blossomed among the people. Young Sira, once taught to conceal every emotion, began to experiment with openness. Small gestures, soft words, a laugh too loud in a corridor. The quiet revolution Marcus and Lyri had begun was no longer a whisper. It was the foundation of a new era. Lyri's mission to the Hadron system was the next test of this new philosophy. The Hadron League, proud and wary after decades of tension, expected formality, if not outright hostility. Instead, Lyri stood before the matriarch in the great sunlit atrium of the Hadron capital and bowed, not with haughty Sira dignity, but with humility and sincerity. "I come to offer apology," Lyri said, her voice carrying through the chamber, clear and unflinching. "Not for what we are, but for what we failed to see, for the pain caused by our logic's limits. I come to ask for understanding, and to offer it in return." The matriarch, draped in silks the color of desert storms, regarded her for a long, silent minute. Tension crackled in the air. Marcus watched from the edge of the dais, heart pounding, every sense tuned to Lyri's courage. At last, the matriarch rose and descended the steps. She placed her hands on Lyri's shoulders, a gesture of acceptance among the Hadron. "Your vulnerability is strength," she pronounced. "Let us begin again, not as rivals, but as allies." With those words, barriers crumbled. Trade routes reopened, long-stalled negotiations leaped forward, and a new alliance was sealed with a document signed in the same hall where suspicion had once ruled. Lyra and Marcus stood at the heart of it, the human and the Sira, whose partnership was fast becoming legend. As Sira ships ferried ambassadors to Hadron's space, change spread like wildfire. Lyra and Marcus convened joint councils, inviting Sira and Hadron to share grievances and to find common ground through both reason and empathy. The Sira, led by their chief envoy and her principal advisor, began to weave compassion into their logic, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. At every turn, Marcus encouraged the Sira to listen, not just to process information, but to understand it. Logic is strongest when it bends, he told one young Sira delegate, when it makes room for the truth of the heart. There were setbacks, counselors who feared the loss of tradition, old wounds that reopened in debate, but Lyra held firm, and Marcus stood with her. Their partnership, once a secret alliance, was now a beacon. The Sira learned to apologize, to forgive, to cherish not only clarity, but also kindness. Stories spread of the envoy who could cry and still lead, who could laugh and still be respected. Marcus became a figure of fascination, the human who had taught a people to feel. In the evenings, after the demands of diplomacy had faded, Lyra and Marcus retreated to their private world. Her quarters, once cold and impersonal, were now a haven of warmth. The lights were dim and golden, the walls draped with woven cloths in Terran blues and Syrah violets. They would sit together on the cushioned bench beneath the viewport. Lyra nestled against Marcus's side, her head resting on his shoulder. In those quiet hours, the burdens of leadership slipped away. Marcus would run his fingers through her luminous hair, marveling at the shifting patterns of color on her skin, a living tapestry of emotion. He would trace the lines of her hand, remembering how far they had come since that first wary day aboard the Syrah ship. "You have changed the world," he whispered to her once, as she lay in his arms. She smiled, the light in her eyes soft and private. "Not alone. I never could have done it alone." Their love was no longer the unpredictable variable her people once feared. It had become the bridge to a richer logic, a logic that embraced the heart. In Lyra's arms, Marcus found a peace he had never known, and in Marcus's unwavering devotion, Lyra found the courage to shape an entire civilization's destiny. Some nights, Lyra would wake from dreams of the past, cold halls, emotionless voices, the endless pressure to conform. Marcus would hold her until the tremors faded, reminding her with every touch and gentle word that she was not alone, that she would never vanish. Their love was the map and the anchor, the safe harbor and the wild sea. They became legends, the envoy who taught her people to feel, and the human who showed her how. Their story spread beyond the Syrah and Hadron, carried on the tongues of traders and diplomats, sung in the ballads of distant worlds. Children, Syrah and human alike, grew up hearing of the chief envoy who had chosen love over certainty, and the advisor who had stood beside her through every trial. Their partnership changed not only the Syrah, but the galaxy itself. New treaties, born of both reason and empathy, brought enemies together and turned rivals into friends. Even those who once doubted were forced to admit the system was better, warmer, more alive for its touch of unpredictability. The coldest logic, it turned out, could be warmed by love. As the years passed, Lyra and Marcus faced each new challenge together, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with tears, always with the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would meet it as one. And on quiet nights, hand in hand, they would stand before the stars, knowing that the future was no longer just rational, it was infinite. This brings our story to a close. Don't forget to hit subscribe, give the video a like, and share in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. Our team will truly appreciate your support. There are plenty more exciting stories waiting for you on our channel. See you in the next video.